As the sun rose over the mountain range to the east, it did little to warm the air. As he was known to his parents and sisters, Jarrod the Brave tried to keep warm by holding his wings close to his body. He was the only one awake, and for once, it was quiet in the nest. His mind was still racing with the words of his parents the night before. Today, it would all come to light, but Jarrod hadn't slept well, despite knowing the day would be of great importance. When he and his sister were born in the spring, they all lived happily in the forest. Their nest was in the tallest tree on the highest peak. Jarrod knew it was a privilege to live there. It was only possible because his father was the leader of the squad. Last night, dinner was delicious. Jarrod's youngest sister caught a fat rabbit, and the 5 birds ate well, though his father grumbled a bit. When I was hunting for all of us, we had more to eat. Mother, I do wish you would let me do the hunting, Abraham complained. Now, dear, you know we have to let the children learn to hunt and provide. If we don't, how will they ever survive? Jarrod's senses came to full attention. A few of his friends had already left their parents' nests, and they complained about the conditions. It was inevitable that his parents would have to follow tradition, no matter how good they were to him and his sisters. After all, he and his siblings were more than 6 months old. And then it happened. After clearing his throat quite loudly, his father said, "Children, first thing in the morning, we need to have a family meeting." Katie said, "Really? What's it about, Mother?" "Don't worry about that now. Just make sure you get a good night's sleep." Jarrod had settled down with a heavy heart. Their nest, high in the sky over Oak Harbor, Washington, was cold. But his parents told him that bald eagles didn't migrate. Were they really going to stay here as winter came? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. And this morning, as he heard his parents began to stir, Jarrod was full of curiosity. Maybe since it was cold and food wasn't as plentiful, they were all going to migrate south together. Somehow he doubted it, but it was fun to have hope. While it was true that, as a rule, the bald eagle didn't migrate south for the winter, they would move to find food. With their immense memory, they would know where to go, and if it were within 100 miles, they wouldn't have to leave their home. Katie flew back from her early morning hunt and dropped a small field mouse at Jarrod's feet. She sensed Jarrod's sadness, and because she believed that only the male eaglets were asked to leave, she wanted to give him some comfort. Katie thought she knew what this meeting was about, and her heart hurt for her brother. She also wondered if her sister would be thrown out of the nest. Esther was weak, couldn't fly very far, and seemed to have a lot of problems. She knew her parents would have to do what nature dictated. It was going to be a sad day all around. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Old Abraham took his rightful place on the highest rim of the nest. Mother busied herself by removing old bones and feathers from the bottom of the nest. This was something she did whenever she was nervous. While the young birds learned to fly, she practically dug to the bottom of the structure in her attempt to stay busy and not think about what was going on. Watching his mother, Jarrod knew his suspicions were confirmed. The bad news was coming. Clearing his throat, Abraham began to speak. Now, the 3 of you know that no eaglet stays with their parents for their entire lives? No matter how much the parents love their babies. Abraham looked away for a bit. Jarrod wondered if it was the emotion that caused the pause, or was it because his father was carefully choosing his words. In our family, today is the day. The fall will turn into winter in a matter of weeks. Food is already becoming scarce, and your mother and I need you to take care of ourselves. As tradition states, mature eagles such as your mother and I do not move. We stay with our nest. We can only do that if our eaglets bring us food. Now, maybe you understand why we began teaching you to hunt when you were so young. Jarrod looked directly into his father's eyes. He wanted to ask a question, but he knew better than interrupt. Abraham was quickly aware of Jarrod's stare and took a moment to inquire, "Was there something you wanted to say, Jarrod?" "Yes, Father. I'm sure my sisters and I understand the tradition. We will do our very best to meet all of your expectations. But I wonder, aren't we supposed to migrate at our age?" "Only you, my son. It is time for you to begin your search for a mate. As such, you will completely leave the family unit. Katie will be our main source of food. Katie raised her right wing ever so much at the shoulder. Yes, Katie? Father, if I'm going to be the hunter, and Jarrod is leaving us, what will become of Esther? That is none of your concern, Katie. You just need to concentrate on your mission. In fact, as soon as the meeting is over, I want you to go and search for a suitable lunch for us. Yes, Father. From her place on the floor of the nest, Mother made a snuffling noise in her beak. She and her mate spent most of the night discussing what was going to happen to Esther. In all their years together, they'd never had to such a thing, and so this would be the most challenging thing she'd ever had to do. Abraham looked at the faces of his eaglets. He was very proud and at the same time, despondent. Though this day came every time he and Mother raised children from egg to flight, this time would be more difficult. He didn't want to ignore tradition or break from the natural order of things. He felt this nesting was special. He looked at Jarrod and thought to himself that he'd never had such a fine son. This eagle would represent his bloodline well. Abraham would have liked to spend more time with Jarrod. Even become good friends if it was permitted. Well, I guess this is it, said Jarrod. Katie rubbed her beak next to Jarrod's and took a run at the edge and jumped to flight. Leaving to hunt, she wouldn't have to watch Jarrod's last few moments in the nest. Esther didn't move towards her brother, but she did caw a message of love. So Jarrod went to her and gave her a beak caress. When he turned from his sister, Mother was standing right in front of him. Her usually bright eyes were dull, and Jarrod understood it was time to say goodbye. Abraham once again cleared his throat, and Jarrod quickly brushed his beak across Mother's crown. Godspeed, my son. Thank you, Father. You were the very best parent an eaglet could hope for. Jarrod cleared his mind of all the sadness. He firmed his shoulders and felt every inch of his wide wingspan. He turned his head for one last look at Mother, and he moved toward the jump-off point. His takeoff was perfect, and he felt good. He spread his wings and began to propel himself toward the rest of his life.